closes.
You're exactly right, and that's really been the first national mention of that issue, and I think it's important that we don't scare people, and I think an effort's been made here not to scare anyone, but people in our government have to start thinking about how, if this actually becomes a pandemic, how it's going to affect our daily life and our rights. What is a quarantine? Who decides who goes into a quarantine?
Right.
What is isolation? Who decides who gets into isolation? If I want to get out of a quarantine or isolation, do I have the ability to go to a court and get out? Will the government say to me, you must get a vaccination if one is developed?
Right.
If I don't get a vaccination, will I be quarantined? If I'm a healthcare provider, if I don't show up for work at a hospital, will I be jailed? Will I lose my license?
We thought it was simple. Either you were going to get sick or you weren't going to get sick.
It's not simple. And we as a society, the freest society in the world, have to think about the balancing between saving our lives if this pandemic comes true and the loss of liberty and the loss of rights as Americans. I think as Americans, in order to stay alive, in order to preserve our way of life, people are willing to give up and to make sacrifices.
Sure.
But at the same time, there needs to be an orderly discussion of what the rights are of the American people when this happens.
Sure.
And there's a lot of modeling that says it doesn't happen at all.
Okay, so let's look at some of the examples.
Sure.
We're talking about closing schools, which I'm sure people would understand, closing the border to Mexico, stop us from gathering in public spaces. We mentioned movie theaters off
There
the
goes
top.
freedom to assemble.
I can think of a lot of other things like church, maybe going to the mall.
Well, what about legislatures? What about the U.S. Congress? What about courts of law? What about not impaneling juries because we don't want to have public assemblies? I spoke to about an hour last night to Dr. Mark Siegel, who's an expert on the flu, and he's written a book on it. In fact, he was on
our show about it.
Yeah, he's a contributor here at Fox News, and he pointed out to me, he said, listen, we can't be panicking at this time. We have examples, when you go back to the 1918 flu,
sure,
and there was a second wave. Well, the problem about the 1918 flu was that doctors thought it was a bacteria.
Right.
We didn't know it was a virus.
Sure.
We have the capacity now to create potentially a vaccine for the fall that contains this strain of virus.
That's exactly.
And so that's a big, big difference. But at the same time, we need to be thinking about how the legal landscape is going to be changing. Our governors have to be looking at this. Our president has to be looking at this. Our state legislature has to be looking at this. And this is the time for the ACLU to act, not to detain Americans as war criminals, but to ensure that all Americans' rights are preserved.
Excellent point.
Very interesting points.
Jr.
I hadn't thought about all that stuff. Thanks, Peter.
Unfortunately.
Plus a possibility of martial law, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Down the
Meanwhile,
road, not going there.
It's coming out this month.
Think about it. It's perfect. Governments everywhere on the verge of falling. They're falling all over Eastern Europe. They're falling all over the planet because of the world implosion as they set up the new Bank of the World, the new carbon taxes. How do they lock down cities? How do they set up a police state? How do they ban public gatherings? How do they ban protesting? How do they grandstand as saviors? They hype up a designer flu, and it's no doubt a designer flu. They did that so when scientists who weren't part of their cabal looked at it, they would at least go, yeah, this is totally new and novel. By the way, it looks like it's an engineer. This is scary. So they can create fear and then say, oh, it's mutating in the fall. You need to take the vaccine. Boy, something special they got for you in that vaccine. Maybe it's like the syphilis for the black men. Remember, that's the government that does this type of stuff thousands of times. The atomic soldiers, Project Shad, nerve-gassing troops, radiating foster children. You better find out who the eugenicists are. Better see Endgame, Blueprint for Global Enslavement. This is their perfect excuse to get in your life. Now they have federal teams that check checkpoints on the roads and ask citizens questions. They have the Army doing it. It's not just the airports now where Homeland Security admitted. That's training. Take your shoes off. Be humiliated. Answer questions. Normal people who are law-abiding, it's about getting us used to the secret police asking us questions, living in a prison, the public schools, thumb scanning to get school lunches, drug dogs sniffing them in the morning, cameras in the classrooms and halls and many bathrooms. Living as prisoners, no tag allowed, no dodgeball, no running. Now at schools nationwide, it's almost everywhere. No hugging, no high-fiving. Prisoners in prison can high-five, even in medium security. Not your children. They're prisoners. It's for their own good. This is all about inducting us into this control grid, this scientific dictatorship. I'm going to recap all these top stories and issues here in a moment. But right now, let's go ahead and call the White House. Here is the number. We're going to call it in a moment. Call the White House, 202-456-1111. Be polite. These are just puppets. These are just actors. This is, the real government is run out of the RAND Corporation and the Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission. These big think tanks brag. They set all the real policies. The military dictatorship that works for them is based not in Virginia, not in D.C., but at Northcom. So remember, you're just calling like a group of Shakespearean actors. You're just calling a theater troupe. So don't be rude to these actors. You know, they work hard, man. They're tired. You know, they go home, Obama smokes a cigarette, you know, maybe hits a doobie or something. You know, he's a really good actor. He presents the script. Don't be rude. Let them know, hey, we know you're actors, and the people will back you up if you just won't stage terror attacks. Or, you know, when your bosses stage terror attacks, take all our freedoms. And tell your bosses, we know they're hyping this to sell the public on forced inoculations and roundups and lockdowns. And we know, Obama, that that's a fraud. You leave the borders wide open and the plane's still flying, but say you may have to lock down our cities. We know you're just training us as your banker bosses implode everything. You've already stolen $12.8 trillion the first 6 months, you know, under Bush and you, working in unison as puppet frontmen, distractions for the public. But we're doing what you want. We're calling the puppet. We're calling the puppet. So let's go ahead and call Obama. I'm going to go ahead and talk to him right now. Let's go ahead and call the White House. Call the local theater. 202-456-1111. Going to call the local actors.
We're sorry. Your call cannot be completed as dialed.
This is the craziest thing. We called that before the show, and it worked. I told you, they've got like 5 or 6 numbers, and they're changing them day to day. And they're like, well, the number's good one week, then it's not good the next week, and then it's good another week.
Thank you for calling the White House comment line. The office is now closed.
Oh.
Your comment is very important to the President, so please call again between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. Our direct telephone number is 202-456-1111. Again, 202-456-1111. Thank you.
Hi, this is Alex Jones. I'm a syndicated radio broadcaster, and I produce some of the most viral videos on the web, the most popular. I know you guys are hip down there as the latest version of presidential actors and frontmen. And I wanted to just call the White House and let the person answering the phone say you should give this to the higher level speech writers and people actually writing the scripts and plays for the actors, that the American people are aware that Obama and George Bush and all of them are just puppets, total New World Order puppets, and that the folks at Infowars.com are not closed on Saturday night like you are, because this is the real world. This is not a Shakespearean, thespian troupe of actors. We are Info Warriors in the Info War exposing the New World Order. And just as I had folks call 2 months before 9/11 and ask the White House not to stage the attacks of 9/11, I am calling you now saying, look, the jig is up. We're tired of the fraud. Tell your masters, tell your bosses that we know that seamlessly Obama, taking the baton from Bush like a relay runner, is carrying out the looting of the nation. The $12.8 trillion has been stolen in the banker bailout. It's accelerating. That by the end of the year, it will be double the GDP that's been stolen. You have bankrupted us. You've destroyed us well. You've done a fabulous job. But I want your masters to know that we are aware of what the private offshore Federal Reserve and the corporate takeover has done. And this staged swine flu release that you guys are hyping up to try to acclimate the local counties and cities and the federalization of the police, like the state police being totally federalized in Arizona that was announced last week. We're aware of what you're doing, and more of the American people are aware. So please, we know you're not really even bad guys. You're actors. You're hired guns to get up there and read off teleprompters. We understand that. But we're just saying to you as the puppets, since you actually talk to the bosses, Bernanke and Paulson and Kashkari Geithner and others, who are just mid-level minions themselves to the Rockefellers and Rothschilds and others, that we're not your slaves. We're not your property. This is our Declaration of Independence. My John Hancock, I'm Alex Jones. In fact, bring me a pen. I want to sign my name big. Bring me a Sharpie here as we simulcast on the radio and TV. That I want the White House to know we are not putting up with this tyranny anymore. I'm not your slave. You don't own me. And you can stage all the bird flu, swine flu crap you want so you can get involved in our lives and pose as our saviors and our bosses and shut down public assembly. We know Mexico's collapsing from your New World Order narco-terrorism, that you guys bring the drugs in together. We know that they've staged this flu situation as a way to unify the people and get folks more worried about surviving than being slaves. But just know this, we're not cowards. We're standing up to you. We're speaking out against you, and we're aware of your activities. So you want our comments? It's this. We know you as actors are aware that real human beings, real people who aren't buying into the puppets of the left-right, are beginning to wake up to what you're doing. And we're not looking at the puppet Obama or the puppet McCain or the puppet Bush or the puppet Barbara Boxer. We're looking past the puppets right now to the elite that actually control